All right, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. My name is MG Govia. I'm the Education and Outreach Liaison here at OK811, and we're joined by Greg McReynolds. He's with Energy WorldNet, and he's going to be talking about generational diversity in workplace. If you have not used GoToWebinar before, real easy interface to use. There's an orange arrow at that time. With that arrow, you can open or collapse the interface. Also, about 2/3 of the way down, you'll see a chat option, or excuse me, a way to submit questions. You can hit that, throw those our way. If you do have anything, we'll address those towards the end of the presentation. As you all know, today's a big day for us here at OK1. It's August 11th, which is National A11 Day, promoting safe digging and damage prevention. And we really look forward to every time we do training when it comes to safe excavation or damage prevention, but we do that year round. And so what we did for today's presentations is look inwardly to the work environment, the people that we work with, that attitude, that professional development. And so I reached out to my good buddies over at Energy WorldNet, and I really appreciate Greg bringing this presentation to us so that we can have a better understanding of how to work in a multi-generational workplace. A couple of quick plugs, and then I'll turn it over to Greg. With it being A11, we were doing a lot of different promotions. If you have not followed our social media, whether it's our YouTube channel, our Facebook, our podcast, anything like that, please do so. You can search OK811. You'll be able to find us on your podcast. We have a podcast called Digging Deep. You'll find our YouTube channel by just searching for OK811 YouTube. And then, of course, social media is really easy to find. So please follow us on all those things. And then if you attended any of our earlier webinars or sessions, you already know about this, but maybe you're new. We produced a Pilsner that we're pretty excited about called A11 Pilsner. It's a limited release craft beer. It's light and easy to drink. And on each can, there's a QR code. And that QR code will take you to an entry for sweepstakes for a potential to win $811. The cool thing about that $811 is it's not my money. It's Energy WorldNet's money. They provided that money as a promotion for that sweepstakes. So with that, I want to say again, thanks to Greg for being here to help with this presentation, and thank you to Energy WorldNet for sponsorship of that sweepstakes. And Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's learn some stuff today.
All right, man. Well, listen, thanks again. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So really what we're talking about today is the Greg McReynolds journey. And this is my journey personally, is I've been challenged to understand how to work in a multi-generational workforce and how my own self-awareness journey has taken me in that direction. So when we're thinking about multi-generational workforces, well, wait, let's stop. You don't really think about it until you think about it, right? And when you think about it, you really say, wait a minute, we all kind of did come from a different generation, or we're working in an environment with people at different ages from different generations. So yeah, it's part of our work life daily, and how we perform in that work life and how we get together and understanding each other is very important. You know, because here's the thing, we approach this with an attitude, and it can be a negative one or a positive one, right? And so when you're looking at some of your peers, and sometimes it's easier for the older generations to look and say, oh, this is what millennials or Zs, this is what they're all about. And they have that negative attitude. And the same thing can go for the younger, the millennials, as they look at the older workforce and say, well, you know, golly, Greg has a hard time with technology, or he's not, you know, as great in this or that. And so if we're not careful, that attitudes that we have towards generation, it can just kind of build up and build. And it's really, how are you going to look at it? And I use Chester Nimitz. Chester Nimitz was the Franklin Roosevelt gave him control of the Pacific Fleet in World War II, and he arrived on the scene right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and they took him on a tour to show him all the devastation. And upon coming back to the banks, they asked Chester Nimitz, they said, well, what do you see? What did you think? And instead of saying something really negative, he said these three things. He said, the Japanese made some of the most critical errors ever in the attack that they planned on Pearl Harbor. So he is already looking at it differently. He wasn't just seeing the sheer devastation. He's saying, oh, look at these mistakes that were made. Number one, the dry docks were not hit. If the dry docks had been hit, the boats would have then had been towed all the way back to America and repaired. And so he saw that as a positive. He said, you know, they attacked us on a Sunday morning, and most of the people were on, you know, were on shore. They weren't on the boats. If they had been in the boats and the vessels, 38,000 people could have been killed versus just 3,800. He saw it as a positive. And last, he said the fuel storage, another big mistake. We had all of this fuel that was already stored just 5 miles inland. They were so focused on hitting our ships that they didn't hit our fuel supply. And that was another critical mistake. In the end, the ships could be repaired, they could be refueled, and they could be put back to sea quickly. That's the attitude that we need to take. We need to look at the workforce that we're working in and look at each other in a positive manner and see how we can work together, because, you know, it's really worth it. So this is, I hope you can hear this. My computer has been having some audio trouble today, so we might have to skip this slide. Can y'all hear that at all?
Nah, it's kind of skipping on us, Greg.
Okay, I'm going to skip that one. Basically, that was the leader of Colonial Pipeline, and one of the things that he was being asked about in the Senate hearing was, you know, this pipeline was 7, 8 years old, and you know, it had been hijacked and ransomware attacked, and they did have guys that were, you know, all the SCADA systems and the technology part got hacked, but they still had people from the older generation that were available to go out there and turn valves and minimize the damage that was done by the attack. So, you know, that gave a good, clear picture to me of, like, you know, here we've got all this advanced technology, and that's good. And the younger generations, man, they can really kill it with technology, but still the need at that point in time was still that high need of experienced workers. The older workforce that had not retired was what he was talking about, and how they were still so critical and about being able to minimize what was going on. So, you know, our generations are non-negotiable, right? I mean, we're just part of the generation we're in. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to have all of these traits. I don't want to stereotype people and say you're a boomer, so this is the way you are. The fact is that you are in a category based on when you were born. Now, there are some cuspers, the people that are kind of on the ends of these generational gaps, but for the most part, you're in the generation. It's non-negotiable. And, you know, the whole point here is each generation grows up with different world views and how they view the world and their place in the world. And that's one thing we've got to keep in mind. So what are we going to cover today? Well, first of all, we're going to try to understand generations. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to understand the clash points. These are the areas that most commonly generations have a area where they clash. We're going to talk about leading the conversation and taking action. So we're going to cover a lot. It's going to be pretty quick, and I will be have this presentation available later. If you want to get a copy, just let me know. Okay. So the key takeaways today. I like to start up front. Like, here, listen, be watching and listening for the key takeaways. We're going to educate yourself and appreciate the differences in generations. Number 2, we want to be respectful and give grace. Number 3, we're going to find common ground and focus on others. Number 4, slay your assumptions and then create opportunities for generational overlaps. So, you know, why should generations matter to you? Well, here's the thing. If we don't learn how to work together, we're never going to be able to really develop a true team. You're not going to meet your goals and the challenges for your future if you can't learn how to work together as a cohesive unit. You know, a lot is riding on your ability to work in a multi-generational workforce. You know, you want to be able to acquire and gain new talent. Number 2, you really want to be able to have a high retention rate. Right now, we're turning people over quite a bit in the business world. And when you're turning people over in that churn, that costs organizations thousands and thousands of dollars. So what we really want to make sure we do is kind of grab on and retain that talent, because we want to progress forward and we want to change, right? And that's the whole idea. What we want to do when we're learning to work together in multi-generationals is we're wanting to get more of the stuff we want and less of the stuff we don't want, right? We want to push and get our older workers to pass on that knowledge to younger workforce. That knowledge retention, that's a big thing. So we need that communication to do it. So let's start out. Let's just kind of take a quick look at generations, all right? And I'm going to start out with what's known as the traditionalists. And these are the people that came into the work in the 1922 to 1945. This is my dad's generation. And man, they are called the greatest generation. And I respect them so dang much because, they came through war, the Great Depression. They were conservative. They were hardworking, right? And so when you kind of try to look at what they were dealing with, they went through a lot. I mean, think about Normandy. Think about the building of the Hoover Dam. This generation had a lot of grit. And so when you look at generations, it's all about, the stories we heard as children, the things that we heard from reputable resources like our presidents, our leaders, news on TV, our pastors, our teachers, all of these things that we were consuming in our formative years. These are the things that build us and mold us. And this is kind of where we formalize, who we are. So you think about this group, this traditionalist. Think about all the things they've seen and have gone through, right? I mean, and let's talk about what was work like for traditionalists. What was it like? Well, it was hard, right? My dad was a sharecropper with 13 brothers and sisters. He plowed behind a mule most of his life. He was the work day was not a time clock. It was the work day was defined as sun up to sundown, right? That's how the day looked. Back in that era, were there a lot of big contracts and big, legal stuff involved? No, a lot of it was just a handshake and a nod, and you lived off your name and what was important to you. It was eye contact and a handshake. Work was very physical. They came through hard times, and that affected the way they would raise their kids. And the thing about this generation is history's already been writing about them. This is the one generation that we can look back and read history and still see. But it is a great generation. Now, I'll say to you, are they gone? Are these people gone? No. For a lot of us, they might still have a majority ownership in the company we work for. Some of them might still be held on or part of your organization as a consultant because we still needed them for that knowledge transfer that we weren't able to get earlier. So are they still in the workplace? Yes. Are we still working with them? The answer is yes. So let's look at the baby boomers, right? That's my generation. I was raised by traditionalists, and that meant my dad was big on about hard work and learning work ethic. But this is 1945 to 1960. And so think about what was going on in society at that time. When you think about it, it's on this slide: Cuban Missile Crisis, civil rights, the Vietnam War, Woodstock, the moon landing. Think about, I mean, I can speak here again because this project's kind of been on me. I was so inspired as a kid. Never with guns, the shows I would see on TV. When we landed on the moon, that was the greatest thing I could ever imagine. I mean, it just sent my mind into seeing the future as just endless opportunities, and it was so positive. But at the same time, we had all this stuff. We were afraid of Russia, and we were doing all the drills under our desk. I don't know if we've got any baby boomers out there, but we used to have drills at school where we get under our desk to prepare for a nuclear attack. If you notice back in the days that our cartoons like Bullwinkle and some of the other cartoons we listened to as kids, all of the characters that were evil had Russian accents. So, what are baby boomers like? What are some of the key characteristics of baby boomers? Oh, number one, they value relationships. Baby boomers were really taught up. They were raised in that era where the idea of the American dream was still really big. They are self-assured and confident. They believe that hard work will make a difference. And we also witnessed all of this technological creativity that came along during the times that we've been in the workplace, right? I mean, I've seen times from setting at a modem where trying to download a picture might take an hour to me now watching Netflix like it's nothing. So we've gone through a lot of change. We're pretty resilient as baby boomers. And then you go into what's next, right? We're going into the Gen X. And these are the people that, I don't know, I'm going to show you right here. This is kind of the latchkey kids. This was mine that I wore around my neck. I kind of was a cusper here, being born in '59. But you look at this generation, the latchkey kids. What were they told as individuals? They were told they needed to go to college. That's what society was telling them. Get a good education. You're going to get a good job. You're going to have a good life. What did they get to see and witness? They got to see the Berlin Wall fall. They had radio, TV, and internet. But we call this generation. It's funny because sometimes we get to bashing the millennials a little bit, and but this generation, they were called the slackers. You know why? Because they gave us work-life balance. This generation saw all of the hardship, the high divorce rates, the alcoholism was increasing. They saw their parents just giving everything to their work, and they said, "Wait a minute, now we've got to have some work-life balance." So this generation defended for themselves. They're very independent. What did your parents tell you? A lot of us, both our parents were working, so we'd find ourselves maybe riding our bikes to school or walking to school and walking back home. Thus the latchkey, because we were so independent, we just got the key. And when we get home, we'd open the door and take care of ourselves. But what was the one thing your parents told you? You know what it was? Remember this? If you were a Gen Xer, don't fall for the candy trick. You know what that was? The guy's going to pull up in the car. He's going to tell you, "Hey, little boy, here's some candy," and then you get taken. I remember my parents talking to me about that over and over and over. And back then we didn't have Amber Alerts, did we? No, we didn't. But we had milk cartons. And I remember sitting there eating my cereal some mornings, and I would look, and there on the back of that milk carton, there would be like Johnny, and Johnny was missing, and I thought, aha, Johnny didn't listen. He went for the candy trick. Well, that kind of stuff is what molded us. That's what kind of got us to be that generation. The way we think, the way we act, the way we view the world and our place in it. This generation does not like to be macromanaged. In my day, we called it supervision. But this generation, they're critical thinkers, they're flexible, and they will question things. They will question some status quo, but a very, very independent generation. And here's the one we'd like to talk about, these millennials, because a lot of the millennials have been coming into the workplace recently. And, we kind of like to give them a hard time. But listen, the future of our country, the future of our companies are resting with millennials. And many of these millennials right now are starting to take some really big leadership roles in organizations. They're very bright, okay? They're socially conscious. They're technology based. They're diverse. They like meaningful motivation. And you'll have to excuse me. I have some nasal issues. I was bush hogging the other day. My allergies are really kicked in, so I apologize when my nose stopped up and I can't pronounce things correctly. But meaningful motivation, that means my generation, if you'd have told us to go into a room and shred paper for 5 years and this was our job, we would have done it and been happy. And we would hope that we could someday work our way up to the job where you can take the shredded paper to the trash can. Millennials are different. They're going to work hard for meaningful work. So, if you're not going to put millennials into an environment where they're shredding paper and they're not going to thrive or survive, they also understand their value, and they will shop the markets for people that are looking for their skills and traits. And as you know, today, there's a big, big hunt for skilled individuals. And millennials are aware of that. They understand their worth. Older generations would stay with a company for 40 years. These younger generations, the time with companies is narrowing. Um, and that's why we have to understand each generation. We have to build work environments that help people thrive in the things that they're wanting to do, and how they move through and how they move up and how they learn. To me, continuous involvement is continuous learning, and you always have to give your employees that opportunity. But this group too also really places a lot of importance with the relationship with their supervisors. And I think that's interesting. I raised two millennials, and we get, like I said, we like to give them a hard time about the 11th place ribbon and the participation trophies. But guess what? They didn't ask for those. It's parents like me that did it. I didn't want my children. I was raised really rough, and my whole life was work, even from being a small child. And I didn't want my children to have to work like I did. I wanted them to enjoy their childhood. It's like, the rest of their life is for work. That didn't mean I didn't instill a lot of strong work ethic in my children, but the fact is we did it. It wasn't the kids that did it, and so we can't just give them a hard time. They have all these little things like YOLO, you only live once, and FEMO, the fear of missing out. And I told my kids when they got out of college, they were on the yo-yo program, and that is your own. So get up, get out, and get going. So, but millennials, they are the future. They're very bright. They're savvy. They can really handle things if you give them an opportunity. And let's look at Gen Zers. We'll talk about them a little bit. You look at Gen Zers and you think, man, do y'all ever take those earphones out of your ears? The Gen Zers are coming into the workplace now. 1996 to 2014. But man, this is a really diverse generation. They come from a lot of diversity. What they have seen, diversity is their norm. They saw the first Black president. They see gay marriage. They grew up in a diverse family structure. They were our first true digital natives. That means they kind of the ones that grew up with the phone or the iPad in their hands. It's just part of their life now. We get really tore up seeing people on their phones and texting and everything. And I teach Sunday school, so let me just say this. There was one day in church that I was after Sunday school that a bunch of my kids were back there, and there was the pastor had asked them everybody to turn to a particular Bible verse, and I saw all the kids on their phone, and I started to go up there and thump them on the head and say, hey, y'all need to pay attention. And I looked, and they were on their phones, but they had a Bible app pulled up. So, you can't always say that just because they're using their phones a lot, that doesn't mean they're not using them to work. They just communicate a lot with each other through texting and through, their phones, whether, it's through Slack or messaging or whatever. So they're financially minded, they're shrewd consumers, and they want to win. And their sheer determination to win is an issue to a certain extent, because they're so competitive that they like to work independently, and that causes a little breakup sometimes in the team collaboration. They're not great collaborators at this time. because they want to work independently because they're so competitive. And then here we come, they're coming around the corner is the Colonials, and we're going to see what happens here. But, this pandemic is going to affect their lives, right? The way they see the world, the way they see themselves in the world, their worldview, the lack of social interaction, or maybe the fact that they didn't get a lot of facial reads through wearing a mask, so it's up in the air to see kind of where these formative years and how this is going to affect this generation. But we know one thing from our look of all generations, it will affect them. So are you starting to see at this point why it's so important to just to have an understanding really of generations? And I mean, if you really just take a minute and you think about it, you say, wow, now I kind of get it, right? And we can say, our views are drastically different, just like we are. And here's the thing that we can't get into, especially us in the older generations, is we can't say, and we can't get in the trap of saying what they need is more of what we have. Because here's the thing, guys, the world has changed. I help my friend sometimes disc, and I'm pulling a disc that's huge. The tractor, I'm pushing buttons and it steers itself down the field. My dad's skills and traits of being behind a mule all day, plowing or disking or harrowing, that's not the world anymore. You can't get into the trap because the world is changing, and we just can't say that they needed more of what we had. And so that's just a word of caution. So let's talk. There's things that's clash points, and most organizations, these are where generational differences seem to pop and hit each other, and kind of cause some the points of contention, and their work ethic, communication, empowerment, and management style. So let's look number one at work ethic. So older generations, they go to work. Younger generations, work is something you do. My dad had a strong work ethic. And the one thing that he told me once, he said, I might not be able to teach you a lot. I'm going to teach you how to work. And to him, that meant physical, all day, high endurance, high output, just get the most you could do in a day and just barely be able to walk back to the house. That was him. I mean, he was a hoss. He was a boss. And when we worked together, I really literally thought he was just trying to kill me every single day. Now, I did grow up with a lot of work ethic, and I had to kind of put that in perspective for my own children. But here's the thing. Older generations, we saw it that way, right? It was just butts in seats. You came, you got in your cubicle, you worked all day, or you got in your office, you worked all day. And, younger generations, they just don't see it that way. They're not workaholics. They're not like us, where we saw success was defined as rank or seniority. Younger workers view work as something you do anytime, anywhere. It's not defined by hours at a desk, and success is not defined by rank, seniority, but what matters to each person individually. And they don't really want to be paid just for time. They want to be paid for services and skills. And so if you're seeing now, just look at the work environment since COVID. You got so many remote workers and so many people, it's all changed, right? So many people working from home, flexible work, days in the office, days at home. So, the work has changed. Another big clash point in communication. Man, this is one I was really terrible at, and still, and I'm not really that great at it yet. I'm still building myself. All of this stuff I'm talking to you about, again, I want you to understand, this is Project Greg McReynolds. All right. So this is stuff that I've been working on for myself. And we'll get into more of that later. But, I found early on that my communication skills were lacking. My emails were kind of short and blunt. I came from a time that you just said what you wanted and you didn't add much language around it. And today, a lot of that communication style can be seen as offensive or defensive or unkind or arrogant. And you can really, people can put a lot of tone to it that you didn't mean to happen. But if you're not aware of the way you're communicating, then you're going to, you're going to offend some people. So, there was one guy that I worked with that he got so frustrated when he would text, a younger worker would text him and he would reply immediately. And then the younger worker might not reply again till like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it would frustrate him so bad that he finally just, he just quit. Just quitting is really not the way that you build an organization. Communication is one of the biggest keys to teamwork and building an organization you can have. And so you gotta challenge yourself to be better at it, and you gotta understand, like my generation, we love getting on the phone, hammering it out, talking it out, and being done. Younger generations, they like emails. You might be using Slack, you might be using text messaging. It is just different, guys, and we have to be different with it, right? So, we can't have one word email responses. We can't be hyper controlling bosses. We're approaching the same thing, but differently. And sometimes when we do that, it creates tension. So I'll just urge you, and we'll talk about it a little later in the presentation. I'll urge you to just really pay attention to the way you communicate and try to make sure that you're communicating clearly. And that's something that I'm working on still today. The next one is empowerment. Trusting your employees to make them feel like they're a critical part of your organization and your success. And what that really means is empowerment is you're giving them defined ways in which your organization can give their employees a certain degree of autonomy. That means working on their own, control their day to day. People like that. Being able to empower your teams to make decisions, to work autonomously themselves, and trust them, right? And here's what happens in our organizations, though. Sometimes, remember the guy in The Office, Michael Scott? I don't know if y'all have ever watched the show. This guy was a great salesperson, and because he was a great salesperson, they made him the sales manager. And the thing about it is he had no managerial experience and no managerial skills. But it's kind of like the Peter principle. You get promoted because of rank and seniority, because you're good at something, and not always because you're really the best person for it or have the training necessary. So younger generations are starting to notice this. They really want to be led by competent people, and they will challenge a status quo, especially if it's just rank and seniority and not skills and abilities. So that's something else that we've got to keep in mind, that these younger generations, they want to be led differently too. But getting back to empowerment, you got to give your team. Sorry, I'm going through here. You've really got to give your team autonomy and let them be able to work independently to help them be a part of your team. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is make them feel like they're, a crucial part of the company and the culture. And so the next one is management style. So let me ask, there's probably people out there that hunt or fish. And if I was to ask you as a fisherman, if you were trying to fish for a bass, would you put a piece of liver on a hook and throw it and let it rest on the bottom of the lake? If you're trying to kill deer, would you, are you going to use corn as maybe as a bait, or are you going to try to hunt with, a feed plot that is something that they want and they will feed on? Well, we're really good at being hunters and fishermen. We know how to get the right tools for for hunting. We know how to get the right tools for fishing. But it's funny when we get to where we're in our workplace and we're trying to manage people, we try to put it under one thing. We use one approach to everybody. And here's the thing, Gen Xers, their leadership style is characterized by fairness, competence, and straightforwardness, and not necessarily through strong people skills. And then by contrast, millennials view strong people skills the most valuable quality a leader can have. So, you know, more experienced employees may also be unsure what to expect from a less experienced manager. So when you're looking at management styles, my whole point to this is you can't look at everybody the same. You can't try to manage everybody from the same placeholder. And we've all been part of a sports team maybe, or a club or something. And, you see, you got to learn real quick. Like when I was coaching my kid, you can really get on to some kids and they'll play harder. And if other kids, if you get on to them, you'll shut them down. And so you have to be really pay attention to the people that you're managing and be able to identify the style that they need and are required to get the most out of them. Because different generations look at management styles differently and they expect to be managed differently. And the one size fits all approach is not really necessarily the best approach. So my challenge to you here is just, be very clear on what your expectations are, but also if you're going to have expectations, be able to give them opportunities to have expectations from you. So don't be afraid to ask them how you're doing as well. So as a leader or somebody in your organization who's wanting to make change, you've got to lead the conversation. There's an old thing about giving them the mushroom treatment. And that's keeping them in the dark and throwing manure on it and hope it grows. and that's what we do a lot of times, right? So we get frustrated when we're trying to work with different individuals, even individuals or generations. And what happens sometimes is we just subconsciously give them the mushroom treatment, or we do it consciously. We just get so tired of dealing with them that we just quit communicating. We shut down. And what are we trying to do? You have to come back to what are you trying to do? You're trying to get everyone to the table, right? You're trying to slow down attrition. You're trying to get the boomer into the hands of the younger generation to transfer the knowledge to the people that need it. And you're trying to keep the conversations going, not stopping. So we have to be real careful. Now, this is the part right here. For me personally, this just blew my mind. And this is where I really, pardon my language, but I really suck. And that is in emotional intelligence. You can look at it as EQ. That's what it's known about, but it's a lot of self-awareness, self-accountability, apathy, and social skills. I always told my children, it's funny I said this, but I wasn't aware of my own self-awareness. I had no self-awareness before starting this journey of my own. But I always told my kids this. I always said, guys, going to work and the job you do is easy. It's working with other people that you're going to find to be the most complicated. But I saw that from a different light. I saw it as a way that you work with people to get what you want, but you didn't realize how your feelings and your emotional state was being projected onto other people. So, I've gone through soft skills training now a couple times. I've read a book, and this is it, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I read the book, listened to the audio book, took the test, made a 78. Now, I made a 78, which is not great, but I really answered the questions honestly. I wanted to see if my mind had really changed, versus just the fact that I've read a book and understand it. And I'm going through it again now, and I'm just highlighting the book to make sure that I make changes now. And I was looking for gaps personally where I was lacking in social intelligence. So, here's the thing, being self-aware, it's not that kumbaya journey, right? But here's the big deal of it. There's a lot of pain in life, right? And how many of you looking at what's on this screen right now felt unproductive or lost about what you should do? Struggling with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, felt lonely, isolated, unheard. Totally get that a lot. Struggled in a relationship lately. Man, when I look at my world and what's going on in my world at any given moment, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I didn't realize how all of this stuff was coming to the surface and affecting my relationships with other people. And so now that I am self-aware, that I am trying to get more aware of like what is going on with Greg McReynolds, what's going on. Like my dad's been sick, my mama's just been diagnosed with dementia. I had a cousin that was killed in a motorcycle accident this week. What's going on in my world, and how is all of that, even though I'm trying not to let it influence how I project to other people, how is it surfacing? Or are there other things that I have not ever even addressed? So, sometimes we just have to stop for a second, right? And you have to ask yourself, how do you feel? What's going on inside of you? What's going on in your world? So do that. Ask yourself, stop sometime and say, what's going on in your world? What are the things that have gotten you frustrated? Sometimes there are things that we haven't dealt with, like an employee or situations in our life that just continually cause us to have all that disruption. Research suggests that when we see ourselves clearly, we are more confident, more creative, and we make sounder decisions, build strong relationships, and communicate more effectively. Now, tell me there's not an upside to just taking a little bit of time and trying to understand yourself and what you're going through. And remember, you've got to keep tabs on how you're feeling. Seriously, how are you really feeling? Emotions are stirring in us all the time, and emotions can be a big distractor, right? We get caught up in our emotions, and if we're not careful, those emotions come out and we're lashing out. So let's keep an eye on what we're really feeling, and that's self-awareness. And read the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's an amazing book. And keep an eye on your blind spots. We create ways to feed our impulses. Don't let distractions steal your thunder. And that's what happens. When I get really, in one of my emotional states, it's really easy for me to kind of, sometimes I can sound off to my wife and she'll say, honey, you don't look like you're watching the show. Well, of course I'm watching the show. What do you mean I don't think I'm watching the show? Well, I'll lash out like that because there's really something else bothering me. And we do that, right? We do that a lot. Let's see where I'm at in this. And we got to be really careful about that. So the next one is self-regulation. Man, I am sorry, but my computer is just jumping these slides on me like crazy. Give me 1 second. I'll be back on. But self-regulation, what it's really about is, do you have control of where you're at? Are you regulating your emotions and how you're feeling? Sometimes you have to step back, and you have to self-regulate. We've all got a little bit of it in us already. But self-regulation, we've got to have that. We've got to put ourselves in check, and we've got to understand what we value, and we have to understand we have to hold ourselves accountable, and we have to practice being calm. And with that, all that means is this self-awareness, and this EQ is really being an effective part of our day-to-day journey, that we're actually embracing it and practice being calm. When you really understand what's going on in your world and how you're reacting to it, you're automatically going to be able to handle a lot of these things a lot easier. So why should I improve my social skills? Well, this one is a biggie, because here's the number one reason. You know what? People that have higher EQ scores tend to make $29,000 more per year than people with low EQ scores. Now think about that. What is going on here that people that have a higher rate of understanding their EQ are making more money? Well, here's the thing, you know, when you have a high emotional intelligence and you have self-awareness, the way you interact with people, the way you conduct yourself with people, the way you communicate with people, it's all different. And here's what happens. You know, a lot of times in organizations, if we come in and we don't have a really good control on these things, we start to do something that is a big negative. And that is, we build a reputation for ourselves. And all of a sudden, within your organization, after a few years of having a lot of low EQ, you built a reputation. And the thing about it is, there's a lot of times no way back from that reputation. Even if it came across and it had you pegged totally wrong, you'll probably never recover from that period of time and the way people perceive you and see you. It's that first impression thing. So you're not going to probably get promoted as much, or you're probably going to be passed over promotions, thus the noticeable difference in income. So that's the big reason to me is, why should I improve my social skills? Because, you know, if I were a young person today, you need EQ more than IQ. And studies have found that people with higher intelligence don't necessarily doesn't equal higher EQ. It's actually the opposite, you know. So it has nothing to do with how smart you are. It has to do with how aware you are of yourself and others. So that's the main reason that you want to improve your social skills and have better self-awareness. It's going to help you in the workplace. And you really don't want to grab that bad reputation. And, you know, and that kind of gets into, like, you build a reputation like, well, so and so is moody. Well, you know, and you just kind of accept it. Well, you know, Greg's moody. Well, that's not acceptable, because people are looking to me and saying, you know, they need consistency to build trust. And so we can't just, you know, say all this stuff is okay when it's really not, because, you know, a team needs consistency, and you want to build trust only through consistency. And moody people, you just can't do it. So there's no place for all those little things in the workplace. So social skills, let's look at them. It's effective communication, conflict resolution, active listening, relationship management, respect, and empathy. If you have strong communication skills, you're going to be able to share your thoughts and ideas more effectively. You've got to be a strong communicator today, especially working in a multi-generational workforce. And you got to have conflict resolution. You know, the biggest thing I've ever known to be able to help me in this area is when I just listen. When somebody is angry, I listen, and I don't say anything until they stop, because until they've actually got everything off their chest, they're not in a position to even listen to what I'm saying. So you got to learn how to, you know, to work through conflict, and you got to have skills in conflict resolution. And the third one is, you've got to be an active listener. You know, you've seen all the stuff on social media where, you know, we don't really listen with the intent of listening. We're only, you know, listening for an area to interject in. We're not really actively listening. We're just listening so we can inject our opinion. You got to really listen to people. You got to really let it soak in and try to understand what they're saying. And you've got to ask good questions to get to the heart of really what's bothering them. And relationship management, you know, maintaining healthy relationships. I struggle with this one still a little bit. Not that I don't struggle with them all, but I struggle with this one a little bit. I kind of an independent worker. And so I'm trying to, grow myself as help, trying to build relationships internally. Now, my job roles have always been building relationships externally, and I love that as a brand ambassador. I get out and do that every day. But sometimes I kind of am not really working as hard as I need to build those same relationships internally, and that's key. And another third is respect. Respect, and you want to you've got to respect everybody in the conversations and respect them as workers and employees and respect their opinions and understand their worldview. Respect is like not jumping in and interrupting, not dominating conversations. So you got to show respect. And then the number big one is empathy. And I think this was probably empathy is the most underrated soft skill that's out there. You know, it's critical for leaders to manage successful teams and organizations to be able to put themselves in the shoes of their workers. And once you're actually able to do that and understand it clearly, what's going on in their life, what might be going on in Greg's world today, why is Greg not at 100%? Well, Greg lost a cousin. He's going through this. You put yourself in their shoes and you show some empathy. And all this comes down to one thing. You've got to love your team. You got to love your people, right? I mean, you can't go about work and you're working with people all the time and you can't expect to have great empathy if you don't have some love. So you got to be able to put love out there to get it, right? And so that's what we want to do. And when we do that, we're the ones that really walk away with the most. So I'm encouraging you to really build the relationship, get to know your team, love your people, and have some empathy, for goodness sakes. We all need it. We're all out there struggling. We're all working hard. We're all trying to get going. And so empathy is, when you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, you watch for body language. You be sure to respond to feelings. You want to be real and authentic, and you want to be respectful and situationally aware. So when you're dealing with people, pay attention to them, listen to them, watch them, show some empathy. It's going to go a long way. So what good is all of this if we don't come away with some action? And here's some 5 ways we can start doing some stuff. Number 1, educate yourself and appreciate the differences. Well, folks, you've done that today. You've done that by being here and just watching this session. And I hope that one thing you took away was, wow, I get it now. There are generational differences, and the reasons are these reasons. And now I can learn how to work with Eddie or Susan better, and they can understand maybe how to work with me better. And number 2, be respectful and give grace. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, everyone I meet is my superior in some way, and that I learn from them. Learn from anyone. And if you approach, multi-generational self-awareness, this whole journey yourself in that type of element, you're going to walk away a winner, because you know that you don't know it all. You know that you've got a lot to improve on. You're able to listen, be respectful. So be a stronger connection across generations. Take that challenge, and you be the one that initiates that conversations and all of that. And number 3, find common ground and focus on others. It's hard to find common ground when all you're focused on is yourself. Great teams are not built around self. A great player does not make a team, but a bad, negative person can break a team. We have to find common ground. We have to find ways to communicate, keep talking. And you can't do that if you're just focused on yourself. So put yourself out there, find ways to work in with other generations and other people. Number 4, slay your assumptions. Survey your team. The best way to find out what they want and how they want to be led is to ask them. And sometimes we just hate asking our team members questions. We just go on with our assumptions and think, well, this is what Greg likes, and this is what I think. And the word about assume, it makes an ass of you and me. So the best thing to do is just get out there and ask. Find out how millennials want to be led. Find out how your team wants to be led. See where areas where you can even improve, and create opportunities for generational overlaps. If you got to silo your workforce, you're always going to have a big gaps where people are going to come off the bridges. You know, you got to kind of move away from that, and you got to get cross-functional teams working together. When you do that, when you get cross-functional teams, you get a bigger, broader perspective, and generally the solutions are going to be more impactful because you've actually, have a greater slate of minds and cross-generational interactions. So in the end, when you do all of this stuff, you're going to have great teams, right? And you're going to be able to work with your teams, and you're going to have great communications. And when you do all of that, you're going to have a lot of value. So one final thought is all generations bring value, unique perspective and experiences. It's our job to find out how to best leverage those resources to the benefit of our teams. So with that, I say good luck on your journey. Mine is continuing to roll. I continue to look and try to work and improve. And I'm telling you, the self-awareness part has been critical for me. I'm on it. I'm making changes, and I'm hoping that my teammates can see a change in me. And the same way goes for negativity. There's no place for negativity in the workforce. So be the positive person. Be the person who's trying to be better. Be the person that's taking all this action and move forward. So with that said, if you've got a question, let me know. I'll raise the little question bar. This presentation is available if you want me to email it, so you can scan that QR code there, and I'll be glad to send you a copy of it. I know I covered a lot of stuff fast, but I don't see any questions, and so I'll turn it back over.
Hey, Greg, that was outstanding. Let me throw on my camera as well. First of all, I think I've made a new friend today. Your presentation was great. I learned a lot. I think one of the things that's really important about multi-generational workplaces is, especially in our industry, we have our excavation crews that are out there. We're going to see those young workers who are just getting their first ever construction jobs, and their supervisors, maybe my age or your age. We're about the same age, Greg. So it could be our age, leading that younger generation, and they're out there in the field. The work environment's a lot different than what we may think sometimes, just being in an office with cubicle communication as opposed to field communication. So this is applicable no matter what the situation is, and I think that was one of my biggest takeaways.
Well, just think
For
about what
today.
you said. We all see work differently, right? There's guys in the field that see a job in a cubicle and they say, you put them in that work environment and they can't handle it because the
Right.
work is mental. They don't like that. They like being in the field. They like the physical work. So the thing about it is all of us in generations as individuals, we see hard work differently. For me, the stress of an office job is pretty stressful, and so we just have to understand it and be aware.
Exactly. Being able to make or understand the generational differences, but then within that um, understanding is, hey, they just adapt differently, they communicate differently, they handle things differently within that group as well. So again, great information today. If you do have any questions, our attendees, feel free to reach out to Greg. If you don't catch this email address, we're going to have this presentation on our YouTube channel in the next couple of weeks. So you can always fast forward to his slide, or you can reach out to me. My email is really easy to find. It's just the word education at oka11.org. Um, Again, I appreciate all of you being a part of A11 Day with us. This is our last presentation of the day, but we have learned so much, and I'm looking forward to getting to know Greg a little bit more outside of this. Um, Final plugs, if you haven't already, go to our website, oka11.org. From there, you can find our A11 certification, which is a quick 2-hour online education program where you get certified all things OK11. Let's not forget about the book. I'm that generation that multitask while things are going on. So I already looked that up on Amazon. So I'll probably be getting that book myself. So Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is also something I highly recommend.
Yeah.
If you are in Oklahoma, and you are interested in getting our beer that we produce for this month, go to your liquor store, ask for a one Pilsner to be ordered. Um, I know it's maybe you don't go to liquor stores that often, but if you do, you can let them know that you're looking for a specific beer. They'll make that order for you, and then that way you can have a chance to win that $811 that Energy WorldNet so graciously sponsored for that sweepstakes. So do that as well. Other than that, reach out to us. Let us know how else we can help you with your education and outreach for excavation safety, damage prevention, or anything else with the soft skills. We look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.